Okay, we're gonna start the last session of the workshop. Are you okay?
I don't know.
I'm confused. Magda is confused. Okay, the last session of the workshop, and let's see, we have everything on. As always, as promised, there's a new face around the table. Again, a virtual table, but a table. So as always, we're going to start a round table of introductions. We're going to start with me all the way to Direta, and then we go to Ezequiel, and then we're going to end with Camilo. Will introduce himself and start the presentation. So I'm Idom, Director of Research on Terrorism, Belligerency, and Cyber here at the Minerva Center. And I am very happy that we are doing this workshop and we had a chance to do it all the way. And then with very interesting discussions, and I'm actually looking forward to this last one. So, Maggie?
Hi, my name is not Maggie. My name is Magda Pacholska. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Astra Institute when I work on military AI with the Dilemma team. And that's it.
Hi, I'm Eden Lapidol. I'm a third-year SJD candidate at Georgetown University, and I research international humanitarian law and non-international armed conflicts.
Are we back at the introduction?
Yes, yeah, we have a new member.
Oh, yes. Hello. Okay, I'm Patricia. I'm dealing with disaster risks. I'm at UCL in London, and I'm a senior consultant for Google.
Hello, I'm Kaya Pachewska, and I'm a postdoc researcher at the Digital Justice Center of the University of Wrocław, and I'm currently researching. I'm so sorry, I was running. Wait, it doesn't time. I'm currently researching the digital evidence in the prosecution of core international crimes.
Hi, I'm Anker Kalafny. I'm the administrative coordinator of the center.
Hi, I'm Giulia Vai. I'm a postdoc fellow at the University of Pavia in Italy. Got my PhD at the University of Milano Bicocca with a thesis, and I discussed a thesis on the possible developments of self-regulation and other regulatory tools to be adopted and implemented by non-state armed groups. And right now, I'm also working with a foundation in Milan, whose main focus is on public health law.
Hello, my name is Diletta Marchesi. I'm a PhD candidate at KU Leuven, where I work mainly on ICL, and I'm writing my thesis specifically on war crimes of denying a fair trial.
Michal?
Hi, I'm Michal Bengal. I'm the academic coordinator of the Minerva Center for the Rule of Law under Extreme Conditions.
Ezequiel?
Hello, everyone. It is great to see you all. I'm sorry I'm not there. It looks like you've been having a great couple of days and discussing international humanitarian law-related issues. My name is Ezequiel Heffes. I'm Senior Policy and Legal Advisor at Geneva Call, based in New York.
Okay, hello everyone again. Hello Ezequiel. My name is Camilo Ramírez. I'm professor in Bosque University, master's in law and specialist in human rights and international humanitarian law. I work in a special jurisdiction for peace too. So hi again. Firstly, I would like to thank Minerva Center and Ido and Michal and all the staff and you colleagues for these days here. Secondly, I'm sorry if I've been so quiet because I am a shy person, but I really learn about from all of you in these days. So, having said that disclaimer, yeah, I am the last presentation, and today I'm going to talk about moral dilemmas, tomorrow or today, lawful actions, but don't legitimate. So when I read the topic for this workshop about warfare tomorrow, I thought in my job was law clerk in a special jurisdiction for peace, and was a teacher of research on the IHL in the Colombian context. Basically, we have come back to an old-fashioned problem between the use the IHL or using bello and the possible recognition of the casus belli or use ad bellum internal. In a specific, in the case of the non-international armed conflicts. Yeah. Okay. So my first clarification, I don't want to deny the uses of the humanitarian norms. Yeah. But I would like to clarify the challenge they have developed in the scenario of the transitional justice. One of them, it has been the question of the Matahari case. That was a case known by the Special Jurisdiction for Peace to review whether it was a grave violation of the international humanitarian law or a war crime. Then if it will be given an amnesty or not to Matahari. So you can be wondering what the problem is, no? And the issue that the Matahari case is that it was a case decided in the local criminal law jurisdiction and some time ago about a girl, the Matahari, and she was convicted for terrorism. So when the judges in a special jurisdiction for peace decide about this case, they define the irregular military operation was a complaint, the IHL. So it was a huge trouble for the jurisdiction and the public opinion, because we have many cases like this. Those, we have the main issue for this paper, that it is. And my intention is to find an answer to this goal. What about IHL and use ad bellum internal? So, to understand what's happened in Colombia, I have to talk about the general transitional context. Yeah? As you know, Colombia is one of the transitional justice experience in the world, and we have two recent peace processes. One of them was with the paramilitary groups in 2006, and the other one is the last peace process in 2016. Yeah, and it was between the government and the former guerrilla, FARC, stands for Colombian Revolutionary Army, People's Army, where we tried to collect most of the several international standards regarding IHL, ICL, and international human rights. So it is a difficult task to have an harmonization between all of them. besides the last peace process, we haven't done for internal violence. In fact, the 2018 Geneva report talked about 31 NIACs in the world. 4 of them were in Colombia, but in Israel, the ICRC talk about 6 conflicts that are this is the 6 armed conflict that are in Colombia. So you can see now we have a big trouble with non-state armed groups. In addition, if you review the peace agreement database search on the UN website, in the period of the negotiation between 2012 and 2016 between the former guerrilla and the Colombian government, you find that in 2016 there are three agreements at the same time for other states and other non-state armed groups in Sudan, in Guinea, and Syria. In 2015, there were 10. In 2014, had 18. In 2015, were 22. In 2012, were 26. So it is possible to assure that it's a common to give some status to non-state armed groups. In this point, I must explain why I understand was use of value intel. But I take the discipline to understand the casus belli from non-state armed actors, because the regular use of value determines the legality of an armed conflict between states. It is the prohibition of the use of force from Article 2.4 of the Charter of the United Nations. But that prohibition does not cover the use of force solely within the state. So that is not allowed for either for the population to unleash an insurrection within a state, or for the incumbent government to use its extensive resources for the runs of the suppression of the rebels. So, in that sense, the absence of the international use of value internal has far-reaching consequence affecting the whole vista NIACs. There are few examples in the international law where any legal institution has said something about the legitimacy and legality of the internal law. In 2015, the Security Council made the resolution 2216. It talks about the Houthi insurgents in Yemen. And based on the Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, it said that immediately and unconditionally they must end the use of the violence and withdraw their force from all areas they have seen. Those the debate about the relationship between the use in value and use of value in internal is arising, and I must mention the Colombian case was the prototype for the current challenge for the treatment of the non-international armed conflict and their parties. So I'm going to explain this case to why can help us to understand my main topic. As I said, Matahari case was a car bombing in the middle of the Bogota in 2006. And it was a symbolic attack by the former guerrilla because it was in the middle of the city, but in the heart of the military intelligence. Yeah. So for that reason, it was amazing or impressive for the Colombian state, but civil population. So when a special jurisdiction for peace reviewed this case, it assessed about the playing the ISHL rules, but it was easy because, as I said, it was a terrorist attack. So the Amnesty Chamber reviewed that case to evaluate if it was possible to give amnesty to Matahari, that was a girl that made the operation and give the intelligence, the information to do that operation. But to understand what happened with that case, I have to explain a little bit what is the special jurisdiction for peace, because we have so many functions. So as you can see, special jurisdiction for peace is a jurisdiction, not a tribunal. It's a jurisdiction. So there are some institutions. No, we have an officer prosecutor. We have a tribunal, peace tribunal, and we have justice chambers. Yeah. The justice chambers, there are three. The first one is Chamber of Acknowledgement of Through Responsibility and Determination of the Facts and Conduct. And it is important because it have to make the macro cases. Yeah, maybe you know about the hostage case by the guerrilla, former guerrilla. Okay, was that chamber. The other chamber is for definition of juridical situation. It is special because it has the duty to review the past behaviors, but for military forces. Because we have an inter-American standard where that is we cannot give auto amnesties. No, so the treatment is different. Is like reject the criminal persecution. Yeah, and the main important chamber for this case is amnesty and pardon, because it has the duty to review the former guerrilla behavior and determine if the facts were international crimes or not. If were international crimes, it cannot give the amnesties. Yeah. So in that scenario, is the Mata-Hari case. The other part of special jurisdiction for peace is a tribunal, peace tribunal. It has a lot of sections, but the principal is appeal sections. Yeah. The other one is revision and sentences section. It is interesting because the function is like a ICTY function to revision, but we have one more that is interesting. It is the variety of the criminal qualification in front of the international criminal law. So it's interesting function. And the other both are difficult to explain because the first one, in a knowledge of truth and responsibility, former combatants accept liability for behaviors, and in that case, special jurisdiction gives special sanctions. The entity of sanctions are like sanctions to fix the damage to the victims, yeah. But if they don't accept it, the responsibility or liability is the traditional trial, adversarial trial between the prosecutor against the former combatant. So for this case, the chamber for amnesty and pardon is important because it was decided about this case. Let me see. Okay. The other important resource is the resource of law for the special jurisdiction for peace. It is interesting because we have a domestic law, but it allows to use the international law and the domestic law. But a difference with other kind of institutions, in a special jurisdiction for peace, the judges can apply direct international law. So in the case of the amnesty and pardon chamber, it's important to develop of the ISL in irregular scenarios because it reviews the former guerrilla behaviors and apply directly ISL. So in this case, I will be there here. Okay. And Mata-Hari case. So what was the decision about the Mata-Hari case in amnesty chamber? The decision was give the amnesty to Mata-Hari.
She's not a girl.
Yeah, it's a girl.
No,
girl is like
a woman, not a...
Yeah, I was.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, a woman. Sorry. Yeah. She was like a spy. Yeah. And she was inside the military leaders. In fact, this operation was against the military graduation, but the high level generals, colonels, and in that day it was the defense minister. So it was a huge operation. And as I said, it has been criticized by the public opinion because it was an attack in the middle of Bogota, besides on the public university. And in domestic law, it was denominated as a clear act of terrorism against the civil population. But what were the factors that were evaluated, assessed by the amnesty chambers? The first one was the nature of the good. No, it was considered as military target because the chamber reviewed the nature of the building, and it found that it was an academy of war. No? In this place, the Colombian military leaders are training. Now, it happened to improve their tactical military skills. So the chamber could confirm its nature with the Colombian legal norms, the administrative rules that point to its nature in evidence. Other kind of evidence were used, as well as the types of workers that was some militaries in service, and etc. For that reason, the chamber said it was a complaint the distinction principle. The second determination was a monumental task because have to establish whether the car bombing was a mean of war that could be legal front of Aisha. So for this task, the chamber used the second protocol to the certain conventional weapons and review if the car bombing was a booby traps, it was other kind of forbidden device, and it found the prohibition is regarding to Article 3 that this instrument, that is the general prohibition about the indiscriminate weapons, no, and the precautive measures. So for the pardon analysis chamber found that kind of handmade weapon, spite of the sometimes has been considered as terrorist and illegal means of combat, certainly whether it can be compliant with the ISL rules, such as precaution and distinction. The bombing car could be a legal means of war. And it is interesting, you know, the description is more long, but this is the short comment. The last part of the assess was the proportionality principle. The chamber examined the complaints of the principle of rule of proportionality. Transitional judges have established that the military operation was compatible with distinction and precaution principles, and they follow with evaluating military advantage and collateral or incidental damage. One of all critics of the operation and use of the ISL to understand and evaluate the former guerrilla attack was the presumed terrorist proposal. So, such as was established in the previous analysis, the military academy was a legitimate target in terms of the using value. To make sense of loss of war assessed after that, it will evaluating the magnitude of collateral damages. In this case, the military operation resulted in 33 injured people, but it was superfluous. It was superfluous damages. So the damage against the military buildings and some minor loss to the military university goods was taken into account. Although the chamber concluded that the scale of the harm was not superior to the military advantage because the type of injuries on the civil people was superficial. The destruction of the civil buildings as well as the Nueva Granada University was fewer, just some pieces of glass from the windows in comparison with the military advantage that was to attack the high level of the senior of the Colombian National Army. Despite Matahari being sentenced to prison for the terrorist crime, Amnesty and Further Chamber evaluate the evidence and the decision from ordinary jurisdiction based on ISHL, and it was possible to remain the operation Redención, this operation, in terms of the laws of war that do it a better knowledge about the conduction of the hostilities in the NIAC, even with non-state armed groups. But with that judgment, there is a question whether the legality of the non-state armed groups operation could justify the casus belli. This is the main point. With this scenario, I would like to talk about the moral dilemmas from transitional justice. But we have to take in mind some step points to consider for Colombian transitions and others. First one, it is a jurisdiction from peace agreement. Second one, we have a tension between national and international duties. In the level of the national duties, for instance, we have a political crime, we have a rebel notion, and as consequence, we have other kind of amnesties, now from the Protocol 2, Article 6.5, but we have amnesties of jure, that is a kind of amnesties to political crime, as well as rebellion. So, in the age of the peace agreements, we have a moral dilemma. If it's correct, the legality is equal to legitimacy. So, okay. So my question about that is if when judges now about this kind of cases and apply the ISL, give some kind of justification of war. And it is difficult because when you have a peace agreement, you have a political recognition or political status from the government. So I don't know if it means you have a casus belli, and it is important to understand because we have different kinds of armed conflict in Colombia. Some of them are guerrillas, but the other are criminal organizations that complain the threshold for Common Article 3 and additional Protocol 2. So the main question is, what happened with that kind of organization, and if it is possible different treatment for those groups. And so main ideas we can take, for instance, if the states have a casus belli, when organization complain the threshold, if it is possible to attack and use and force, it is a kind of use ad bellum interdict. Or if you are in a peace negotiation, for instance, paz total is now the current peace process in Colombia with the National Liberation Army, or NN, and with the Autodefensas Militaristas de Colombia is a paramilitarism and traffic drugs group. If you have to treat that kind of structure in different way. As non-repetition warranty, it could be positive to establish use ad bellum internum, because you can make two things. First one, you can use a double imputation for a collective structure for started an illegal or illegal war inside the country, and you can check if you can use that use ad bellum internum to negotiate with new criminality in the context of the NIAC. So yeah, this is my general choice.
I'm going to continue with Ezequiel. Response? Comment?
Yes, no, thank you very much, Camilo. First of all, it is great to finally meet you, because I know we have exchanged emails in the past, and it was great to read you and read the paper. So I'm going to start by highlighting some of the points that I think are actually very relevant. And I say, because I know that this is being recorded and it might be posted later on, that everything I say is in my personal capacity and nothing relates to any organization. Maybe I'll turn off my camera. I mean, I guess you all saw that I exist, so I can. Is that okay? I'm sorry about this.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Camilo, for I don't know what was the last point that actually I managed to share. But otherwise, I was saying that I thought it was interesting that you're bringing cases from domestic law dealing with IHL, and also raising the Colombian case, because it's much rich. The first suggestion is maybe you want to include the name of the case in the title of the paper. I don't know, because the focus actually is that, so it might be relevant to say specifically, the Matahari case. The second point that I have written down here is, I thought it was interesting that you focus on the use ad bellum perspective. This thing of like, there is an absence of use ad bellum for armed groups, and maybe domestic law is dealing with this somehow. And I wanted to ask you whether you have or you want to give more attention to the whole idea of combatant immunity, that there is nothing in IHL of NIACs. And because when I read this, I thought like maybe they're actually not dealing with use ad bellum. Maybe they're dealing with somehow the lack of combatant immunity in NIACs. So you had individuals participating in the conflict, and those behaviors are in the context of that conflict that are related to the hostilities, and and they're respectful of IHL. So why bring that discussion to the use ad bellum, and why not focusing on the use in bellum part? And I'm saying this because maybe actually there is an issue there, a tension there, in terms of use in bellum and use in bello in NIACS. We've been repeating over and over that they should be differentiated, and there is a distinction between use ad bellum and use in bello. They have to be separated because one doesn't influence the other. And for Ajax, this is clear because in Ajax you also have combatant immunity. So states recognize themselves as equals. So then, they decide not to prosecute their fighters, their combatants, for participating in the conflict. So and they're not going to be prosecuted for that because they recognize that the use ad bellum is separated with the use in bello. For NIACS, there is a lack of combatant immunity, and members can be prosecuted for what we call the use ad bellum internal. So maybe there is something there. I'm saying this because I'm not sure you can tackle this whole idea of causus belli as you raise without tackling as well the combatant immunity from an IHL perspective. I have a few points that I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting that you just now raised the whole issue of the ELN, because one of my points that I had is, okay, you're raising this here. What's for the future peace processes? What's going to happen? How can this influence the perspective of potential immunity for IHL violations, or how IHL is being dealt with in future peace processes? And the third point that I wanted to raise is related to the combatant immunity thing that I was saying before. I thought it's interesting because this is a case in which the Heffes said that this is respectful of IHL. And one of the points that people have been raising is, and there was a debate at in the ICRC review a couple of years ago, specifically on combatant immunity, in which this was raised, saying like, if you have members of armed groups that are respectful of IHL, maybe, for those people, they don't have to be prosecuted for participating in the conflict, or they have to be given somehow a combatant immunity, a similar status to the one given in IHL. And that could serve to encourage armed groups to respect IHL, knowing that they're not going to be prosecuted for acts that are respectful of this body of law. So having a point on compliance might be something useful if you think about the future of conflicts. So maybe for the ELN, knowing that if they respect IHL, they're not going to be prosecuted for those acts. Again, it might be relevant. Then you raise sometimes the issue of the moral judgment, and I don't know why or where this is coming from. I would be curious to hear a bit more. Is it because, again, armed groups are created in an illegal way, from a domestic perspective, and then that could start to legitimize the armed group somehow? But I thought, again, it's interesting to differentiate between use ad bellum and use in bello. They might be, in which field they are being legitimized? Are they being legitimized from the perspective of the use of force and their use ad bellum, or they are being legitimized in terms of use in bello, respect of IHL? So I see it more as a legitimacy from the perspective of use ad bellum. But for me, the problem with the Matahari case is a use in bello problem. It's not so much, it's this thing of combatant immunity. Then in terms of, sorry, I come back, I'm jumping from one thing to the other. It's in terms of the goals of the paper, and perhaps this goes to some of the points I mentioned before, and the structure of the piece. I would be very clear to what you want to address. Sometimes I have the feeling that you jump from one thing to the other. They are all very relevant and very interesting. But I think you have to be clear. If you want to address the Matahari case, then, or if you want to address the lack of use ad bellum for NIACS through the Matahari case, or you want to address the status of armed groups through the Matahari case, these are all different things that you address them all in the paper. But I think sometimes it jumps from one thing to the other. On the example of the Security Council, I thought it was interesting. Maybe it's relevant to see other peace agreements in other contexts to see how similar issues have been dealt with before. I was saying that it might be relevant to see not so much in terms of the Security Council, but in terms of how other peace processes have dealt with this issue. So the Security Council, they have dealt with use of force by non-state actors in different ways and on multiple occasions. Every time they say that at the possible, it's a threat to international peace and security. Not so much, they don't reflect so much from the perspective of the use of venom. So, but maybe other peace processes they have in terms of, and discussions have happened. You know, I'm thinking about, for instance, in the Philippines. I'm thinking about certain contexts in Africa where they have also included certain relevant provisions in terms of peace process. So maybe there is nothing, but I'm saying it might be more relevant than the Security Council, because the Houthi example is one among others, but I don't think they do reflect so much about these issues. I think with that I'm going to stop, because I think I have already shared most of the points that I wanted to share with. The other, last point is that I think I have written down something here in terms of the nature of IHL. So in the last few years, there have been some discussions about whether IHL authorize or restrict or prohibit behaviors. And it goes to the nature of the law, you know, and it's whether, you know, it's like by. So the question is that, I mean, that I pointed here is that, you know, the legality, if, you know, at some point you said something like whether these might term certain actions as legal. And it's interesting because this is an attack that has been recognized as lawful under IHL. But for me, the question of legality under IHL, is it the question of authorization or is the question of restriction? Does the court say this is lawful because, or this is not, this is lawful because it was to a military target and so on and so forth? Or actually, what's the prohibition under IHL? Is it, are you authorizing a group to attack lawful targets, or you are restricting the groups from attacking unlawful targets? You see what I mean? Because the FARC here, they have been recognized. I mean, this has been recognized as an act that was in line of IHL. So my question is quite different if you're speaking about legitimizing a group. If the activity was, I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying, but if the activity was, you're saying that this is not illegal, than saying you're authorized to do it. And I think it's quite different. If you're raising the point of, let's put the legitimacy point in under perspective, you know, because it's not the same. If you're saying they're prohibited from attacking civilians, and saying they're authorized under IHL to attack military target, and because they are authorized to do so, they're not being prosecuted. And I think it's different how it is framed from a legitimacy perspective of the group. Having said that, again, I come back to a last point here. It's in terms of the structure. I would try not to jump through all these points, but to perhaps to narrow it to one of this and say, you know, this is what you're going to tackle. That's it from my side. Yeah.
If anyone has a comment, question, they can go after me. Well, there should be some privilege in being, right? At the end of the day, at the end of the workshop, at the end of the presentation. Actually, I think, short question. One, I completely agree with Ezequiel on the combatant immunity. When I started reading your paper, I thought that this is the direction you're going at. I thought like because you start talking about the moral justification of participation and IHL. I thought that in IF, this is what we are not necessarily missing, but should be discussed. And I completely thought that it was if they are operating on a justified cause, then IHL immunity seems to be the logic direction you would go. So I completely agree with Ezequiel on that one. The one thing when I first started reading the paper, I thought that you're also going to go into the just war theory. because you're talking about moral and justification and IHL and just war theory is the missing link here, and I don't think you need to go into the full discussion because that's a paper on its own. But the question of non-international conflict and NIAC use of bellum or whatever we find. So some has already been written. Some have already been written, but like Eliav Lieblich, which Eden mentioned a couple of days ago, in a different context. Eliav is writing a lot about that link between just war theory and IHL. So this is a lot of his writing deals with that. And I would go and look into everything, which is a couple of articles in that specific area of just war theory in no international conflict context or internal conflicts. Yeah, so Adil Haq writes a lot also about these things, more from the moral perspective. And where Eliav is going it from more for the legal perspective. So Eliav is really drawing that link and Adil and there is a huge group of scholars who write about just war theory who are called the revisionists of just war theory, because the traditional approach is complete separation between jus ad bellum and jus in bello. I don't care if it's international conflict or non-international conflict. They want complete separation. The revisionists, which are among others, McMahon and the Haq is there, and then you have Eliav is also within that list. So we have a few, and it's a huge list, and I can show you a few sources in this regard. I don't think that this is something you need to fully develop in your paper, but definitely everyone who deals with moral in the context of armed conflict and IHL would jump immediately and say, what about that discussion of just war theory? I'm missing that in the paper and it should be included. So that's my main comment apart from the combatant immunity. And it again goes back and forth because they argue always for combatant immunity if you are justified. So it goes on the same line as you are supposed to be. Okay.
So I have a few comments. For me, it was really strange, the insertion of jus ad bellum. Like, I didn't really understand why we're talking about it, because the paper doesn't really discuss jus ad bellum. I thought it just used this phrase, but it doesn't explain whether or not it has anything to do with the matter. And for me, it was really kind of like oddly kind of like put in because, again, and I think I'm more of a traditionalist, moral, just war theorist, not really theorist, but like in my perspective, that the separation is of great importance, because then you don't have this question whether or not I'm legitimizing this group or not. And I wasn't quite sure, and I think it should be a bit more clarified in the paper. Why are we asking this question? And if your question is, I only want to inform the public, so there would be less of an outcry when more non-state members would be kind of like given amnesty, but I don't think they're given amnesty either. I think that they are being on trial, therefore it's not an amnesty, right? And they are found non-guilty for violation of IHL, which are very different things. So if you're using the term jus ad bellum just to clarify this, I think it provides more uncertainties than just saying like, this is the relevance that we're discussing. It's an IHL question. Therefore, we're not asking whether or not they had a legitimacy to use force in the first place, right? So that's why I was a bit confused about why even using this as a terminology or not. And that's why I don't think that the question of like, kind of contrary to, the combatant immunity
I'm not sure whether or not we really need it, right? Because they are being put on trial and their actions are being evaluated, so not just because of the acts that so maybe I should be more clear. I think that there is a difference between the domestic violation that they might have caused and then the IHL, whether or not violation that is being discussed. And to use also the term of like a terror attack, it's from, I guess, from the domestic legal system, right? Because it doesn't exist in IHL, right? So I think that's the tension that you are trying to kind of overlap, right? Between the domestic system and the violation of the criminal, like penalty criminal system and the international system. And there, I'm not sure if we really need to have the discussion about combatant immunity. I mean, even if we don't have combatant immunity, we can still say that these actions that were committed are not a violation of IHL, right? Yeah. Unless, again, you want to say they should be exempt regardless, and then you need to discuss combatant immunity. But if you don't want to go this far, then I think you can just like trying to see how can we bridge gaps between domestic system that deals with these actions so differently than the international, that IHL. I don't know if it makes sense. And again, for me also, you're using the term moral, but then I don't know what it means, you know, like, yeah, we need to understand where are we taking it, why is it there, and does the question whether or not something is corresponding with our own sense of justice means that it's immoral, you know, because I think it could have been something that you were alluding to, but I wasn't sure if it was like part of what you were trying to say, because again, and it goes back to the fact that you said that it was the decision was so much criticized on the public sphere, you know, so that's what I think that was like the motivation to explain it better. So yeah, I think that's it.
So I want to follow up on that. The whole notion of combatant immunity means that you're not going to be put on trial for the mere participation in those activities. So if the system already exempt them for the mere participation in hostilities and only trials them for violations of international and international law, it is de facto combatant immunity. But if it's an equivalent system where, in accordance to that specific special system, they're being tried for participation or for acts that were done in that context, but still under criminal domestic law, they are still able to be put on trial for terrorism, which might be considered as just the mere participation in the hostilities. Then we have that duplication or friction that need to be addressed, because providing someone combatant immunity, I think Ezequiel would be the best one to talk about, is the whole notion of providing some sort of incentive for the warring sides to follow IHL. Otherwise, if they are going to be put on trial either way, well, what is their incentive to follow IHL?
If I can add something to that point, I think it is quite relevant for the future peace processes, because if they see, you know, that perhaps people are not being prosecuted for acts that are in line of IHL, maybe that encourages the ELN or the other groups to be respectful of IHL.
Yeah, but yeah, I understand. I understand the immunity combatant concept, but it is belligerence, no, and it is part of the IHL. It is the case the National Movements of Liberation. Yeah, it is belligerence. But my question is about the moral reasons in the political philosophy, the jus and bell, the casus belli to wage a war. Yeah, because from my point of view, that topic is essential to the future peace process, in the sense that if we say the car bombing operation is legal the other armed groups in Colombia
But we're not
made
saying
the
that,
same.
that the carb bombing is legal.
Yeah.
We're saying that under the circumstances.
Yeah.
So it's a different thing, and I think that's also needs to be pushed. And if you are thinking about future peace agreement, and I think that's what the question of jus ad bellum is, irrelevant, is the peace agreement starts with there was a conflict.
Yeah.
Now what are we doing with it? And if we're gonna use jus ad bellum to point fingers and to blame, then maybe that would kind of like undermine the whole idea behind this peace agreement.
Yeah.
So if we're saying, okay, game over, we've reached this peace agreement process, and now we want to still prosecute violations of IHL, it's a different thing than also violation of initiation of this conflict and finding blames.
Yeah, that's what was bothering me a little bit, because you mentioned transitional justice, but I've always thought about transitional justice as a moving towards a new peace situation.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, as Eden said, like discussing who started what, it's not really compatible with the process of peace building that transitional justice aims to do. Is it?
Yeah, but I think you have to put some limits in transitional justice, and one of them could be the jus ad bellum, in the sense, if you define what is just casus or casus belli, you can have a limit to negotiate with some kind of groups. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Klaus Kreb has a paper about that. The internal aggression crime. No, if you said from the international law, because in the legal local system is illegal to take the arms. If you say from the international law that casus or that motivation is illegal, you can put some restrictions to negotiate it with armed groups.
Yeah, exactly. If we are at the, like, if we have already have the peace agreement, all these things happened before. Now we have settled these these faults, whose fault is for the beginning of the war, etc., of the hostilities, and now we have the peace agreement. Then we have to move towards a peace building process.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the allocation of responsibilities, let's say, is prior to the peace agreement, temporarily speaking.
Yes, and also jus ad bellum assumes, contemporary jus ad bellum assumes the illegality of use. Jus ad bellum doesn't really deal with knives, right? And I think because what states would kind of like automatically would say, it doesn't involve states, like non-state actors, because the assumption is that non-state actors cannot initiate armed conflict, right? Because it's illegal, and that's it. So would that really?
Yeah, but in the fact, non-state actors started some wars for different.
Ezequiel wants to add something. Ezequiel?
Yeah, no, two quick thoughts. The first one is actually, I think the point that is relevant, why it is important to come back to the issue of combatant immunity, because here is she's not being prosecuted for taking up arms in the conflict. She's not at least how you present it in the paper. She's not being prosecuted for being a member of the FARC. She's being prosecuted for a specific IHL action. So I think that's quite different in terms of IHL jus ad bellum, because she's not being prosecuted for jus ad bellum charges, but for jus in bello thing. So, and the second point that I think it's relevant in terms of the discussion of jus in bello and jus in bello is until where do you stop prosecuting jus ad bellum to start focusing on jus in bello? Okay, she's a member of the FARC, and that's it. And of course, it's like, which actions as a member of the FARC you're going to prosecute as jus in bello, and which actions you're going to be prosecuted as jus ad bellum. So if you think about an international armed conflict, and you think about the states fighting, when do you stop doing the assessment of jus ad bellum, and when you start doing the jus in bello? And do you keep doing the assessment of jus ad bellum throughout the conflict, or at some point you say, okay, you stop? I mean, do you assess every attack through the lenses of both jus in bello and jus ad bellum, or you don't? And when you deal in a NIAC, do you do the same or you don't? So yeah, just these 2 points.
Anyone has anything to add? Okay. So thank you, Camilo. Ezequiel.
Yes.
Just checking.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm sorry about the connection. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Under the consideration, I think it was way more than we were ever hoping for. And so thank you, everyone. And I think that calls it for today's session. So thank you, Ezequiel.
Thank you, Camilo. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ido. Okay.